I wanted to talk about a little bit more of a personal topic for this video. It's easy to look around at people that you see as successful and sort of imagine that they've always been that successful. For most of my story, I was an underdog and I was kind of going against a lot of things, and I think it's an important thing to talk about, especially for young and aspiring musicians. I started playing cello in the 4th grade in my public school system. I continued going to orchestra, but I never studied privately. The instruction that you get in a group in an orchestra is not really enough to actually really play on your own. It's just enough to sort of survive in the ensemble. Once I started private instruction, everything kind of changed for me. My love for classical music totally blossomed from that point, and I really got on the fast track to wanting to be serious about the cello. The unfortunate thing about this is a lot of people who end up wanting to be serious about playing an instrument are people who have been studying fairly seriously from a young age. Especially string instruments, which you can start really young, it's not uncommon to start private lessons at 3 or 5 years old. So when I was 15 years old and starting private lessons, I was obviously behind a lot of people. I didn't let that discourage me though. I was super passionate and I managed to learn a lot of difficult repertoire and actually decide that I was going to take auditions to be a music major. So I had no classical musicians in my family. I had no specific leg ups to help me. I just started practicing a lot and learning the repertoire that the school said I had to play for auditions. I auditioned at about 4 or 5 different schools as a performance major, and I was always young for my grade, so I think I was 16 years old when I was taking my college auditions. I remember being in the auditions and, talking to the other applicants, the other people who were getting ready to audition, and them saying, "Oh, what are you playing?" "Oh, Haydn Concerto, I'm playing Haydn Concerto too." "Oh, which Bach suite are you playing?" "Oh, 3rd suite, I'm playing that too." "Cool, how long have you been taking lessons?" "Oh, 10 years. And for me, it was like a year and a half, maybe. So I was in a completely different position than the people auditioning. I still was very prepared. I practiced a ton, and I did get into all but one of the schools that I auditioned for. But that was really just the beginning. I thought, okay, great, I got over this hurdle. I got into music school. I'm a performance major. Now I'm just going to keep working hard and I'm going to catch up. Unfortunately, when I got to college, the teacher that I had chosen was not exactly the best fit for me. Because I was coming into college with only about 2 years of private lessons, I had so much technique work that I needed and so much guidance that I needed to sort of make up for lost time. Unfortunately, the teacher that I got was sort of more someone who was big on inspiration and higher artistic concepts, which was great, but what I really needed was structure. So after about a year of struggling and feeling like I wasn't making the progress that I needed, I started considering switching studios at my school. I had already had a frustrating year or 2 on cello. I sort of found out later that probably the reason that I got into this school as a performance major was because they were sort of low on cellos at the time. And by my sophomore year, there was a bunch of talk of getting a new faculty member who was going to bring a bunch of new good cellists to the school. Which seemed fine, great, I was going to have new good colleagues. Little did I know that I was going to get pushed even more to the edge of importance at that school as stronger, better, more experienced players entered. Either way, I still stayed supportive of my colleagues, I still stayed somewhat interested in what I was doing, but when I was feeling like my teacher wasn't really the right fit for me and I wasn't seeing the progress I wanted to talk to, some of the teachers at my school about possibly switching studios. You would think switching teachers at a school where you are already accepted and already performance major should be somewhat of a no-brainer. Because this particular teacher had brought in a lot of new students and seemed to attract a lot of good talent for the school actually insisted that I take a formal audition to enter this other studio. I was a little shocked that I had to re-audition for a school where I was already accepted, but I sort of thought, okay, this is a formality, I'll go have a lesson with this teacher. But it was not a formality. I actually got rejected from this teacher's studio, with my school basically leaving me with no suitable teacher. Their idea of a good option for me was taking lessons from this teacher's assistant. So here I am, a performance major paying thousands and thousands of dollars per semester to take lessons with an assistant. Naturally, this didn't work so well for me either, and I still felt like my progress was stagnating, and I was also in an environment where I just didn't feel like I was given much respect. it became pretty clear that because I was technically behind my peers, I wasn't really honored as a member of the school. I wasn't really given that much respect. When people see you sitting in the back of an orchestra section, they think, oh, she's not very good, she doesn't practice enough, she's not serious enough, which is kind of ridiculous because I was incredibly serious and incredibly passionate, and I couldn't have even gotten that far had I not been. So college for me was a lot of wandering around, trying to improve, trying to be the cellist that I wanted to be, while being surrounded by a lot of cellists who had, a stronger background than me, and therefore just sort of seemed to have it easier at school. I used to sit in on some studio classes for the other teacher's studio, since there was no studio class for my teacher. And I remember sitting there in the studio class, and maybe one of the grad students or one of the more advanced members of the studio would play some concerto. And there'd be an opportunity for everybody in the class to give some feedback or some thoughts. And because the most advanced, flashy person was playing something, nobody would have a single piece of feedback to give that person. They would all kind of sit there quietly and awkwardly like, well, that's better than I can play, so I couldn't possibly have a criticism for this person. Whereas I would see it as great playing, but I would think, sounds wonderful, have you considered in the double stops you could bring out the inner voice more, or, have you thought about this phrasing thing? And I could tell that the grad student or whoever it was appreciated the feedback, and there's obviously some sort of strange hierarchy among the advanced good players and the not so good, still struggling players, where we're not encouraged to have this open communication, or people are afraid. And I felt constantly like I wasn't expected to have a voice, like I shouldn't have a voice because I was this runt, in the back of the section, not as good as everybody else. On top of that, and I've talked a little bit about this before, the conservatory mentality is all about, your seating audition for orchestra, how well you play your orchestral excerpts, and then how far up in the orchestra you're going to sit. And then maybe beyond that, concerto competitions or other competitions around, playing solo music and achieving some high ranking. Those are basically the only things given any real value in conservatory, especially when it comes to playing your instrument. You're required to take theory, piano, all those classes, but as a performance major, everything is about your instrument and how you play. We have one class on career skills that a lot of people slept through or didn't do the work for, and that was probably the most valuable class in the curriculum. It had to do with, getting gigs and building your resume, and even though it was a good starting place, it wasn't really even enough to scratch the surface on real professional skills. So even though I knew that I had motivation and drive, I knew that I was passionate about this and I was going to find a way to make it work for myself, none of that really seemed to matter based on what my technical level was. When I discovered baroque cello in my junior year, a lot of things started to change for me. I did workshops and summer programs that were all on playing on historical instruments. When I learned the baroque style, it just fit my technique so well. It came really naturally to me. I felt really attached to the repertoire, and everything just sort of started to click for me again in a way that it hadn't in years. So I felt super lucky that I had found baroque cello and that was what I wanted to do. So I sort of started moving forward with that as, okay, when I'm finished with college, I'm going to go on to baroque cello. So it's my junior year, and after still not finding a suitable teacher at my school and things really not working out with the assistant, I actually got special permission to take lessons with a teacher at a different school, and I absolutely loved working with her, but I was still sort of grappling with my feelings about the progress I hadn't made since I got to college, the fact that I was behind leading into college, and it was still a bit of a struggle for me. The kicker really comes at the end of my junior year. I complete a year with this teacher. I'm feeling better about my technique. Unfortunately, she tells me she's not going to have room for me the following year, and now I'm going into my senior year of college, yet again without a teacher, without someone who wants to teach me, who's invested in me, feeling yet again like I'm kind of alone and that nobody really believes in me. So luckily that summer I was doing more baroque festivals, and my teacher who was leaving me behind said, the baroque cello thing seems to be what you're interested in. Maybe you can do baroque cello lessons for your last year. So I decided while I was at my workshops for the summer, I was going to ask around teachers and see if anybody would take me on for my senior year to study baroque cello. And luckily that happened and that worked out for me. So for my senior year at school, I was focusing on all baroque cello, and I started to sort of create my own world again where I wasn't comparing myself too much to my colleagues, and now my colleagues weren't looking at me as this bad cellist, but instead a cellist who was doing something a little bit different. Finding my niche and finding my area really revitalized me. It got me working hard again. It's really hard when you're being constantly discouraged by the higher ups that are supposed to be inspiring you and pushing you along. When you feel like those people, the faculty members, administration, don't have your back, and your colleagues and other students don't have your back, who are you supposed to fall back on? You're supposed to be, as a student, in an environment that's supportive, that encourages your growth. But realistically, that just wasn't the case for me at all. So as I started to do baroque cello and sort of care less and less about the dynamic at my school, I started getting a little bit of shame from the faculty for pigeonholing myself into baroque cello and not doing everything. I remember having a faculty member say to me, well, you can't make a living on, baroque music alone. You have to do both. Basically saying, it's so hard to make a career in music as it is. Why are you going to limit yourself? And I just thought, modern cello is not working out for me. I get no respect. I work really hard and I don't see progress. I started when I was behind, and at this point I'm not even passionate about it anymore. I found baroque cello, that's what I love to do, that's what I want to invest in, and I'm going to make that work for me. So that was the attitude that I took for my senior year, and in that time I auditioned for grad school and prepared to study baroque cello for the next 2 years as well. So I kind of invested everything into that and just said, you know what, I know that everybody at this school seems to care about orchestra auditions and concerto competitions, but I don't see any success stories after school coming from those types of experiences, and I'm personally not drawn to that, so I'm not going to invest in something that isn't meaningful to me. Once I was really focusing in on what mattered to me in school, it made a huge difference, and I started feeling the weight lifting off of me. That being said, I had my work cut out for me for grad school. I had a very rocky undergrad where I didn't make the progress that I needed to, and now I had 2 more years of school to sort of get my chops where they needed to be and get my technique where it was. And I had an incredible teacher who had a lot of incredible students as well, and I was yet again feeling like the runt, which is often how I felt in school. But I practiced a lot. I worked really hard, and most of all, I explored what interested me and what was most important to me. Choosing to do baroque cello, choosing to go against the status quo in my undergrad actually taught me a lot, because I got to understand what my own values were. I got to say, you know what, I'm not going to fit in if I'm not doing all these things that everyone else is doing, but I'm not good at those things. I don't want to be good at those things, and I'm going to put my energy into something that really matters to me. So here I am now, 4 years out of grad school, since completing my master's degree, which I did directly after my undergrad. I have recorded 2 solo unaccompanied albums, which I produced myself. The first one had a release concert. The second one had 3 release concerts, which were favorably reviewed. I formed a string quartet, the Emergence Quartet, which is a period instrument group that has been in Boston Globe, on NPR. I very recently had an article on me in the Huffington Post, which is awesome. A lot of great things have happened to me since graduating, and I think a lot of it comes from the struggles and the lessons that I learned in those difficult years. It's so easy in school to feel like we don't measure up because there's a very specific criteria of what people expect. And unfortunately in classical music, a lot of it is kind of antiquated and backwards. It's unfortunate, but the way that our teachers came into success and, built their careers are not as relevant today as they were then. We can't do those exact same paths. It's a more competitive field. It's more institutionalized, with more and more schools offering degree programs in classical music, and there's just more people out there doing it. So we have to be innovative, and most importantly, we have to be passionate. There's no amount of, robotic practicing we can do, concerto competition winning. that's not going to achieve a long-lasting, rewarding career. Those are kind of long projects that give us an instant gratification, a win, a congratulations, but that are not necessarily going to lead to concrete work. What we need as musicians is a steady stream of work, a good set of colleagues, an environment where we feel like we can flourish as artists. If you want to win competitions, more power to you. That's great. And I think the amount of practicing that you have to do for something like that can only make you grow as a musician. So if you enjoy that kind of stuff, more power to you. I've never been, I'm not a sports fan. I'm not a math person. I'm not into evaluating things in that kind of way. I'm someone who really likes greater artistic goals. I see a lot of musicians that I went to college with who were, sitting in the front of the section or, the shining stars at the studio, whatever you want to call it, and it doesn't look like they have much going on now. And I'm not saying, oh, that's what you get, or, karma or anything like that. It's just that you can do all the right things in school. You can please all the teachers, play all the repertoire, practice in your bubble for 6 hours a day. But if you don't see beyond that, if you don't know inside what drives you to make music, and, you're not on some level unafraid to put yourself out there, you're going to be really stuck when you're not in school anymore, because school gives you this perfect little outlet where you can follow directions and be a musician. But that's nothing like what it's like to actually be a musician. Nobody gives you directions, there's no more instructions, and you have to make it work, and you have to not be too self-conscious, because if you are, you won't put yourself out there. I had to learn to not be self-conscious, because being the runt, being the worst one, every day, being surrounded by people who I knew thought, I'm better than her, because that's how most people think in conservatory. I had to accept, okay, they can play higher than me, they can play more in tune than me, they have a better vibrato than me. I had to accept that that's what it was, but I'm still me. I still have my voice, I still have the things I want to express, I still have my ideas, and with time, I will have that technique that I want to. And luckily, I practiced a lot and made a lot of improvements, and as musicians, we are always continuing to improve. I, think of the day where I now can play repertoire that I could not play before, and I can make sounds and colors that I couldn't achieve before because I didn't have the technique. It's an amazing feeling to feel like you can achieve those things, and it's not worth it to let other people's perception of you get in the way of achieving what you want for yourself. I hope if there's any music students or any kind of artistic student going through something like this, that my words were a little bit of encouragement. If you have any thoughts on this, maybe your own experiences in music school or your own thoughts, or even some questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Thanks for listening to my little personal story. Be sure to subscribe to my channel as I do new videos every week. And if you like these videos, you can help support me on Patreon. Thanks for watching.